Hey guys, what's up? It's Dante and welcome back to my channel for another video. Guys, I'm really excited to have another video in store for you. I have been pounding the pavement. Is that the word? Not really sure, but I have been working very hard. That's what I'm trying to say. On getting as much content for you guys as I can. So here is another video. This is my fifth or sixth video that I filmed this past week. Y'all better be thankful in the comments down below because I am working for you guys, so when I am gone, you will have a bunch of videos to do. So this video is probably going to be released, I think, mid-February. So hi, how's it going? It's currently January like 5th, 6th. So let me know what it's like in February, guys. Comment down below how the weather's feeling. I think it'll probably be snowy by then, but you know, that's cool. So anyways, let's get right into today's case, which is a case that I have been obsessed with. Like, I don't want to say, it's like borderline obsessive. This case was one of the first like actual true crime cases, I'm sure for a lot of people as well, that really got me into like true crime. And so this is the case of Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. I don't know why, but this unsolved case has always been on my mind. I don't know, I think I had like a really strong connection to her. I don't really know why, but ever since I learned about this case, I found her story so interesting and also sad at the same time. And I see a lot of similarities between myself and her, which is very odd. And I don't know, at one point, like if you asked me in 6th grade when I first found this case, bitch, I said I was the reincarnation of her. I was out of it. But, you know, it's a very interesting case, and that's why I decided to present it today. So Elizabeth was born on July 24th of 1924 in Hyde Park, Boston, Massachusetts. On October 30th of 1930, when Elizabeth was just 6, her father actually abandoned the entire family as he felt too much pressure, as this was just after the stock market crash, which happened in 1929, and he felt like he was unable to provide for his family as now he was completely bankrupt. And so he decided to completely abandon the family as he thought that was less embarrassing. Interesting. So the mother was then forced to raise all 5 children by herself. Due to Elizabeth having asthma, it was extremely hard for her to be in the cold winters in Boston, because Boston is pretty high up on like Earth, and so it's very cold there during the winter. And so because of her asthma, the cold was very hard for her to breathe in, and so they actually did send her to Florida during the winter months. So she would spend time in Florida with family, as it was a lot warmer down there and it was better for her health, and she would stay in Boston during the summers where it was still pretty warm. At 19 years old, Elizabeth got back into contact with her father and asked if she would be able to live with him in California, specifically Vallejo, California, as she had aspirations of being an actress, and she thought, I'm gonna move to California because that's, you know, very close to Hollywood, very close to Los Angeles, where a lot of famous actors and actresses get their big breaks. So she moved there with having the aspirations of being famous. One of the things that always stuck with me about this case is she got the fame she wanted, she just had no idea in what form she would get it, which I feel like is so eerie and something that I wanted to mention. So she lived in California with her father for a little bit, and she got a job at the Camp Cook Post Exchange for a little while before she inevitably quit. I just think it wasn't what she wanted. It just wasn't good for her, so she left. After a large fight with her father, she then moved from Vallejo to Santa Barbara, which is another city in California. However, after being arrested in Santa Barbara for underage drinking, she was actually sent back to Medford, Massachusetts to live with her mother. So during her age between 19 and 22, she bounced around between Florida, Los Angeles, and Massachusetts, like constantly going from her father's to her mother's back to Florida to live with relatives. So she was constantly moving around. During this time, she also worked as a waitress, so that's kind of how she made most of her money, and I think that's a good job for her, especially because she was constantly bouncing around, and you can easily, if you have restaurant experience in the past, become a server at different restaurants around the country. So many people who knew her, specifically her family, described her as someone who was very soft-spoken and just wanted to live like a very glamorous lifestyle. She wouldn't drink, smoke, or curse, as she felt like that wasn't really in her glamorous lifestyle image, and so she tried to be as classy as she could at all times, and I think people said that she just really was a classy and glamorous person. Like, she wanted to live that life because I think it fit her personality type so well, and that's why I think she wanted to become a Hollywood actress, because those people live glamorous lives. You know, you see in the movies, especially the movies from the 1930s, 1940s when she would have grown up, it was very glamorous to be in Hollywood during that time. She was also a very attractive young woman. I'll put some more pictures here. And she had like that very, you know, standard, beautiful look. And so because of this, she got a lot of attention from guys. So they would constantly be buying her meals, trying to impress her, and constantly be buying her clothes and other things to try to get her, win her over. And they wanted to, you know, show like, oh, I have money, and try to impress her like that. So because of her desire for this glamorous lifestyle, she was constantly at nightclubs where she would be dancing with her friends and listening to music, as she loved music, and that was a huge thing that I got when I was reading about her. From the many sources that I went through, they said that she really liked music and that she was just a very happy person and, you know, full of life and full of youth. Throughout the months of November to late December of 1946, Elizabeth lived with 8 other women in a small apartment in Hollywood. The last time that anyone had ever seen Elizabeth alive was at the Blitmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles on the night of January 9th, 1947. There has been some speculation that she might have been at another restaurant a few blocks away. However, there's no confirmed sightings of seeing her there, so we're just gonna have to take it that the last place that anyone really saw her confirmed was at the Blitmore Hotel. So now we're gonna get into what happened to Elizabeth Short. In the early morning on January 15th of 1947, a woman named Betty Bersinger was taking her child out for a walk. On their walk on the street of 3800 S North Ave, Los Angeles, California, she stumbled upon what she believed to be a mannequin, as she described it as having very pale skin and it just looked very doll-like, especially the positioning that she found it in. She also noticed that the mannequin was separated at its torso and it looked like, you know, just a broken mannequin, and that's what she thought it was. However, she thought it was strange that a mannequin would just kind of be sitting on like a residential road, and so when she went up to it to look, she saw that it was not a mannequin, but it was a person. The body was cut in half at the torso, and the body appeared to be completely drained of blood as it had no pigmentation in it. The woman also noted seeing a cut from her mouth right here to around here to form a smile with the rest of her mouth. And this is known as the Glasgow smile, which I actually did a lot of research on when I first learned about this case because I thought it was really weird and interesting, but it is a known thing, and there have been other murderers that have done the same thing to their victims, thought to be inspired by this case. The woman then ran to a nearby neighbor's house, telling them that there was a woman who needed their help, and so they called the police, and the police arrived. However, the police were unable to beat out the news press, and so when the police finally got there was tons and tons of news crews trying to cover this, as this was a pretty large case, and it was very uncommon, I guess, in this area to have serial killers, especially ones that would dismember the victims so brutally and leave them displayed in the open. So when the police first got there, the first thing that they noticed was that there was no blood at any place in the crime scene. So what this meant to them is that her body was probably killed somewhere else, as there was no blood around, and then brought to this location. So whoever did this wanted the police to find her body. They also noticed that her body appeared to be positioned specifically in a certain way. So what I mean by this is when they found her body, her arms were above her head. It's positioned like that. I'm not going to show pictures because I think it's really messed up if I do that. But she had her arms like above her head, and she also had her legs spread wide open. They also noticed that the intestines from inside of her were underneath her butt, so they were positioned underneath her. So the first thing that they wanted to do was identify who this body was, and so they took fingerprints off Elizabeth Short while she was still at the crime scene and faxed them over to the FBI headquarters where all the fingerprint data was kept. This was relatively new technology to use a fax machine for this type of thing, and they were able to identify her after only 56 minutes, which in the 1940s was a really big accomplishment, honestly, because forensic technology was just not where it is today, and it was just not really a big thing, and it was not like research as in-depth as it is now. Her prints, they noted, had actually been logged into the system twice. The first time was when she applied for a commissionary job at the Army's Camp Cook in California, so like I mentioned earlier, they had to take her fingerprint because it was a government job. And the second time was when she was arrested for underage drinking. Because of this, the police sent her mugshot from the arrest into news outlets and agencies because they wanted them to send out the picture and see if anyone had seen her in a week or so leading up to her body being discovered, because they wanted to figure out what had happened prior to them finding her body. The news had also gotten word of the story, as I mentioned, they were there, and they completely ran with it, and they dubbed her the Black Dahlia. The reason why they called her the Black Dahlia is because she was rumored to have worn almost exclusively black clothing, and the movie Blue Dahlia had come out at this time, which was a murder mystery, and so they thought by putting Black Dahlia, you know, black because of what she wore, Dahlia together because of the movie, it would strike a lot of interest in this crime because, you know, this was a large murder mystery movie that came out at the time, and so they wanted to, you know, sell their papers, and so they thought this would be a really marketable way to do that. Elizabeth's body was then taken into the coroner's office. They then performed a full examination of her body, where it was revealed that her body was cut in half surgically on her spine, which meant there was no harm to her organs or her bones. So there's only one spot on your body that you can cut in half without injuring the bone or injuring any organs, and that is the one spot that they did that. Coroners noted this. They realized, like, oh, this must have been someone who has experience with bodies and has experience in the medical industry, because only someone who is very talented and skilled would be able to perform such a surgery like this. In the examination, it was also revealed that she had eaten feces, most likely been forced to eat feces. Her flesh and pubic hair were taken off of her body and put inside of her anus and her vagina. Her uterus and her nipples were also removed. On January 21st, after the murder, the local news station received a call from a man claiming to be Elizabeth's killer. He claimed they did a really good job of covering the case. He didn't intend on turning himself in, however, he still wanted to have some more time to play with the police, and he still wanted to see if they were able to catch him on their own. So on January 24th, they received an envelope in the mail, which was addressed to the police, and it said in, you know, like the very stereotypical like serial killer using like cutout magazine letters. This is how the letter was sent to them. Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers. Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow. And along with the letter were a couple items that belonged to Dahlia, including her social security card, address book, and birth certificate. The contents had been completely wiped with gasoline to remove any fingerprints and DNA evidence. The police, over the next few weeks, had received multiple letters taunting them from the assumed murderer. Overall, the police did not have many leads. They did, however, have one large suspect at the time of this case in the 1940s, and that man was George Hodel, a doctor in the nearby area who would have had the expertise to perform a surgery like that which was done to the Black Dahlia. However, they were unable to find enough evidence on him, and so they had to drop the charges against him. So now, years after the Black Dahlia murder, and I'm talking like 40, 50, 60 years almost, a man named Steve Hodel, which might sound familiar, has come out and said that he believes that his father was the murderer of the Black Dahlia. And as I mentioned before, he was actually a suspect in the case. Steve was a former police officer, and so he had been gathering a lot of evidence that he was going to present to the police department because he strongly believed that his father, George Hodel, was the murderer of the Black Dahlia. So the first main reason why Steve believed that his father, George, was the murderer is because he had the required medical knowledge to perform the surgery that was done onto Elizabeth Short. When he was younger, he studied at a medical school in hopes of becoming a doctor. He ran LA's venereal disease clinic, which shows he had a medical background and he would have been able to surgically separate Elizabeth's torso. So he was a doctor in the area at the time of Elizabeth's death. Steve also noted that his father would have been in medical school in the 1930s. And during the 1930s, there was a new surgery technique or procedure that had just come out. This was called a hemicorporectomy. Yep, got it. Which is a procedure to slice the body underneath the lumbar spine, which would sever someone's body without breaking their bones, which is the exact technique that was used on Elizabeth Short. So the fact that he had been in medical school when this technique was being taught so widespread, and then Elizabeth Short died only a little bit away from George Hodel with the same technique used on her, it was a little suspicious. I even admit that. The second main reason why Steve believed that his father George had done this was because when he went through his father's old belongings, he had found some old pictures. On top of this picture stack was just pictures of his family, pictures of even him and his wife. However, when he got to the very bottom, he saw two pictures of a girl looking down. I will try to include those pictures right here. He believed these looked astonishingly like the Black Dahlia, and he even admits this was the first thing that he found that even made him think, well, maybe my father did have something to do with this case and did have something to do with this murder. So he took the pictures in to be analyzed against other pictures of Elizabeth Short, and the analysis came back with mixed reviews. So when he originally went in the 80s and 90s, they said that it was pretty hard to tell if Elizabeth Short was the person in these pictures and that they were really inconclusive in determining if, it was actually Elizabeth. However, when he came back 10 or so years later with the same pictures to use some facial detection technology because forensic technology was constantly evolving, they had put the pictures in there, compared it to the Black Dahlia, and the software had come out and said that it was very likely that this was the same person. So overall, basically what I'm trying to say is that it's inconclusive whether or not the picture was actually of Elizabeth Short. However, if you believe that it is, it shows that there was a connection between them and that Elizabeth Short had at one point been with George Hodel and had been taking pictures with him. The third reason, as I had mentioned before, the killer of Elizabeth Short had left and sent letters to the police department. When he sent these letters, originally he had used the serial killer-esque cutting out letters and stuff, but the second time he had actually handwritten at parts of the note, and so they had his handwriting. And so when Steve had gotten access to this, he noticed that this handwriting was eerily similar to his father's, and so he pulled a sample from his father and a sample from the Black Dahlia's murderer, and he had brought them into experts to be analyzed. However, again, there was mixed reviews about whether or not this was actually the same handwriting. Some experts said that it was very likely that it was, and some experts said that these are not similar at all. So it's very inconclusive whether or not these two handwritings were of the same person. So I'm going to go back to the 40s, so we're going to time travel a little bit. So back in the 40s, when Elizabeth was originally murdered, the police did suspect that he had something to do with this, as he did live in the area, so they did believe that he was involved in some degree. And so they decided to place recording technology, which I'm not sure of the legal ability of this. They did place recording software in his home, and so they had like a little mic set up around his house. And in a conversation with George and a friend of his, they had gotten George saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead." If you weren't guilty, why would it matter if your secretary was alive or not? So this is obviously very incriminating evidence, at least to me, and I don't think the reason they could use it, maybe because I'm not sure they legally obtained this. However, I think if this was probably their strongest evidence, which is, I think, circumstantial, as it's not like definitive proof that he did anything because he did not directly admit to doing anything. However, I think it's very incriminating that he said they can't talk to my secretary because she's dead. So that implies that she might know something about this. Who's to say he didn't even kill the secretary? Who's to say he didn't kill her to cover it up? I'm just saying, there's some shady things going on with this case. After years and years, so now we're gonna go back into the future, years and years and years after this murder had taken place, this was a huge case that struck the entire nation. I mean, even me from the Northeast had heard about this case, which is in the Southwest of California. So this is a very big case that had gone all over the country. And so people all over the country had been criticizing the police department, the LAPD, for how they handled this investigation. At this time, apparently the police department there was very corrupt, and so they had been taking a lot of bribes. And so who's to say that they didn't take a bribe from George Hodel? There was a lot of evidence to suggest that George had done the murder, and so it's very strange that the investigators would all of a sudden just drop the case, having all this evidence piling up against him, and not even investigate any more into him. So it was very strange that they just decided, well, let's not research this case anymore. Something else to note is that most of the actual physical evidence from this case has magically disappeared at the same time that this case was being investigated. So does it seem too far off? I know this is very conspiracy theory-esque, very tin hat of me, but does it seem too far off that maybe the LAPD had just accidentally lost all of the evidence that could have been used against George? It's very strange that this happened. So in current times, meaning the past 10 years or so, Steve Hodel has actually released his book called The Black Dahlia Avenger. And in this book, he talks about Black Dahlia, her life, and why he thinks his father did this. And so this book originally was met with a lot of positive reviews, as people believed that his research was super thorough, and he was a very reliable source. This was the son of George Hodel, so he had a lot of access to George's belongings, and he was also a police detective where he worked for literally decades on cases similar to this. So it seemed that he would be a very good person to investigate this type of situation. However, even though a lot of people did strongly believe that George Hodel was the killer, the LAPD still decided not to reopen this case even nearly 80 years after the murder. They actually just completely failed to acknowledge Steve's research at all and kind of didn't even look into the notes that he had been sending them to reopen this case. Overall, the case of the Black Dahlia is still well known by many, as it is one of the oldest unsolved crimes in America. Now, you may think it is solved because there's so much evidence against George, but it was still never charged, and formally, this case is still considered unsolved. Many books and movies have been released about the Black Dahlia, detailing her life and how it ended. And one notable portrayal is, I think Scarlett Johansson was in a movie called The Black Dahlia, where it detailed her life. And I've actually never seen it, but I really want to. Comment down below if you guys have seen it. I'm kind of curious if it's a good watch or not. I'm not really sure, but maybe it is. But yes, guys, that is the case of the Black Dahlia, or Elizabeth Short. I hope you guys enjoyed this case. I found it super interesting to actually finally dive as deep as I did into this case. Originally, I had just read like the Wikipedia description in like 6th grade, but now I actually gone through like the FBI databases, and I've been doing a lot of research into this case, and it was really nice. Also, this was a nice case to just kind of research because it was so old and it was not as graphic as the other cases that I've been doing, guys. This is kind of like a nice little break week for me and for you guys. Here's a nice little video, and it's kind of more tamed in comparison to some of the other stuff that I have been researching recently. So I hope you guys enjoyed this case. Please do not forget to check out the links down below. I have a lot of stuff in the description box that you guys just never look at. kind of hurts my feelings, but it's fine. I have my Twitter, I have my Instagram, and I have my Redbubble handle. So guys, if you're interested in getting some cool stickers that may or may not have anything to do with my channel, you can go down there and see the designs that I have. I currently have 2, but I'm planning on adding way, way, way more because I just, you know, like making stickers and they're really fun to do. So guys, I love you so much. I hope you guys found this case super interesting, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys!